Rain streaked the glass doors as Elijah stepped into the bank, the sound of water dripping from his coat blending with the low hum of the lobby. His shoes clicked on the marble, drawing brief glances from people in line, glances that slid away, almost as quickly as they came. The air inside was bright but cold, every movement echoing in the high-ceilinged space. Elijah took a slow breath, adjusting his collar, feeling the weight of being noticed, and then instantly dismissed. He joined the line, standing tall, his posture calm but alert. The security camera above blinked red, following each step. Madison, the teller, straightened at her station as Elijah approached, her smile tight, her fingers drumming an uneven rhythm on the counter. "Morning," Elijah offered, his voice steady. Madison's eyes moved from his face to his watch, then to his briefcase, as if searching for a flaw. She nodded, but her tone was clipped as she replied, "How can I help? You?" Elijah slid his ID across the glass, her fingers pausing on the edge, her gaze lingering on the photo a moment too long. The security guard shifted his stance near the door, one hand resting on his belt, eyes flickering between Elijah and Madison. A woman in line clutched her purse a little tighter, her body angled away. Madison's pen hovered above her notepad, waiting. "Account number?" she asked, her voice a shade too sharp. Elijah recited it, his tone even, his jaw set with practiced patience. The clock on the wall ticked, marking the slow passage of time. Behind them, a child dropped a toy, the sharp clatter breaking the quiet. Madison flinched, then forced a smile. Elijah noticed the manager peering out from the office, pretending to review paperwork but watching the exchange with a wary eye. "Take your time," Elijah said softly, letting the words settle between them. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows. Inside, the tension thickened, quiet and heavy, as if everyone was waiting for something to break. Elijah's reflection in the marble floor looked back at him, unblinking, a man shaped by years of patience, holding his ground in a place that made him feel both visible and invisible at once. Before the story continues, please let us know from where you are watching this video. Write your city or country in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like if you believe in stories that challenge injustice. Your engagement gives power to voices that need to be heard. Madison's eyes lingered on Elijah's hands as he placed his wallet on the counter, her gaze sharp and searching. She forced a polite smile, but her jaw was tense, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "Can I see your identification again?" she asked, her words clipped, almost rehearsed. Elijah handed it over, his fingers steady, his expression unreadable. Madison's nails tapped the keyboard, each tap a small reminder of her scrutiny. The line behind Elijah shifted, a quiet shuffle of feet and impatient sighs, but Madison didn't seem to notice. She glanced at his ID, then at him, then at the screen, her brow furrowing as if she expected something not to match. "And your account number?" she pressed, her voice a notch higher. Elijah repeated it, calm and measured, refusing to let her tone rattle him. The security guard, standing near the door, watched the exchange, his eyes narrowing slightly, but his posture unchanged. A woman in line leaned toward her friend, whispering, "She's always like this with certain people." Madison's shoulders stiffened, but she kept her focus on Elijah, now asking, "Do you have any other proof of address?" Elijah slid a utility bill across the counter, his jaw tightening just a little. Madison examined it longer than necessary, her lips pressed into a thin line. She handed everything back, her fingers brushing his for a brief, awkward moment. "Thank you," she said, but the words were flat, lacking warmth. Elijah met her gaze, holding it for a heartbeat longer than expected. The tension between them was thick, every gesture loaded with meaning. The manager, standing near the office door, watched with a frown, sensing the discomfort, but saying nothing. Madison straightened her stack of forms, trying to regain control, but her authority felt brittle. Elijah's dignity remained intact, his patience a quiet protest against every subtle test. The lobby felt smaller, the air heavier as the power in the room shifted, almost imperceptibly, toward him. Madison's fingers hovered above the keyboard, her eyes darting from Elijah's paperwork to his face, searching for something she couldn't name. She cleared her throat, the sound too loud in the tense lobby. "Excuse me a moment," she said, voice brittle. She leaned toward her co-worker, her words barely above a whisper. "Can you watch my station?" The co-worker glanced at Elijah, shrugged and nodded, sliding into her chair with a sideways glance. Madison walked briskly to the manager's office, her heels clicking on the tile. The manager, Mr. Riley, looked up from a stack of folders, his brow furrowing as she entered. "Is there a problem?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. Madison hesitated, then replied, "I just want to double-check this account. Something feels off." Mr. Riley sighed, pushing his glasses up his nose, and followed her out. The lobby quieted as they returned, customers sensing the shift. The security guard straightened, his hand resting on the counter, ready for anything. Elijah stood perfectly still, his expression calm but his eyes sharp, watching every movement. The co-worker at the next window glanced over, fidgeting with her necklace, while a man in line checked his watch, impatience flickering across his face. Madison gestured to Elijah's documents, her hand unsteady. Mr. Riley reviewed them, his lips pressed together. He looked at Elijah, then at Madison, then back at the paperwork. "Everything appears to be in order," he said quietly, but his eyes lingered on Elijah a moment longer. Madison nodded, biting her lip, but didn't sit down. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions, every breath heavy. Elijah's patience held, but the power in the room had shifted. Suspicion now hung over the counter, and everyone felt its weight. The moment stretched, the lobby waiting for someone to break the uneasy stillness. Elijah opened his briefcase with practiced care, pulling out his ID, a business card, and a stack of neatly organized papers. Madison reached for them, her hand trembling ever so slightly as she laid each document on the counter. She examined his ID, tilting it to the light, then cross-checked the numbers on the screen, her lips moving silently as she read. Mr. Riley hovered behind her, arms folded, his gaze flicking from the paperwork to Elijah's face. "May I see your business license as well?" Madison asked, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Elijah handed it over without a word, his eyes steady. Madison's brow furrowed as she studied the embossed seal, running her thumb over the half-raised lettering. The line behind Elijah grew restless, a man tapping his foot, a mother shifting her child from hip to hip. The security guard leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he watched the exchange. Madison shuffled the documents, double-checking every detail, her breathing shallow. "Everything seems fine," she finally said, but her tone lacked conviction. Mr. Riley nodded, but didn't move away, his presence a silent reminder of authority. Madison gathered the papers, her hands unsteady, as she returned them to Elijah. Their fingers brushed, and she pulled back quickly, her cheeks coloring. Elijah placed each item back in his briefcase, his movements slow and deliberate. The room felt smaller, the tension thick as honey. "Is there anything else you need?" Elijah asked, his voice even, but his eyes sharp. Madison shook her head, unable to meet his gaze. The staff behind the counter exchanged glances, some uneasy, some quietly sympathetic. Mr. Riley cleared his throat, but said nothing. The air was heavy with doubt and something like regret, every second stretching the distance between suspicion and apology. Madison hesitated, her hand hovering above the keyboard as if unsure whether to press forward or retreat. She glanced at Mr. Riley, searching for reassurance, but he only offered a tight nod. "I think I'll need to place a temporary hold on your account pending further review," she announced, her voice wavering just enough to betray her uncertainty. Elijah's lips curled into a small measured smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned in slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Is that really necessary?" he asked, his tone calm, almost gentle, but the warning beneath it was unmistakable. Madison swallowed, shifting her weight from foot to foot. The customers in line fell quiet, sensing the shift in the room's energy. Mr. Riley stepped closer, his jaw clenched. "We just want to be thorough," he offered, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. Elijah held Madison's gaze, his expression unflinching. "You're sure this isn't about something else?" he asked quietly, the question hanging in the air like distant thunder. Madison looked away, her confidence slipping. "A woman in," Line whispered to her friend. "He's not backing down." The security guard watched, his hand resting on the counter, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe. Madison cleared her throat, fingers tightening on the edge of the desk. "It's just standard procedure," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Elijah's smile remained, steady and unreadable. "I understand," he said, his tone soft but resolute. The tension in the lobby was palpable, every eye fixed on the counter. Madison's authority felt fragile, her decision suddenly heavy with consequence. Elijah straightened, gathering his documents with deliberate care. The manager lingered, uncertain. The air was thick with anticipation, the outcome unresolved. Elijah's quiet confidence signaled that something was about to change, the storm gathering just beyond the glass. The memory came back sharp as Elijah waited at the counter, the present dissolving into the past. He was 10 again, standing beside his father in a bank that smelled of old carpet and metal coins, the kind of place where voices dropped and people pretended not to see. The line crawled forward, but when they reached the counter, the teller's smile faded, replaced by a stiff professionalism. "Can I see your ID? And a second form, please?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. Elijah's father produced his license and a utility bill, hands steady, eyes unwavering. The teller's gaze lingered on the address, then flicked to Elijah's father's face. Her lips pursed as she scanned the documents a second time. Elijah felt the weight of the stairs behind them, the way the security guard's hand hovered near his walkie-talkie, the way the other customers shifted, pretending to be absorbed in their phones or the posters on the wall. "Why do we always have to wait longer?" Elijah whispered, voice barely above a breath. His father's jaw tightened, but he knelt down, meeting his son's eyes. "Some folks will always make you prove you belong, son. But you don't let them decide your worth. Dignity is armor. Keep it polished." The teller finally nodded, stamping the papers with a dull thud, but her eyes never softened. As they left, Elijah's father placed a gentle hand on his back, guiding him through the lobby's maze of velvet ropes. "Patience is power, Eli. You stand tall, even when they want you to shrink." The memory faded as Elijah blinked, finding himself back in the present, his stance unconsciously mirroring his father's. The lesson was carved into him, a quiet strength that couldn't be shaken by a cold stare or an extra question. The rain outside grew heavier, but inside, Elijah was unmovable, his dignity untouched, his resolve a silent answer to every doubt in the room. Madison sat behind the counter, flipping through the laminated pages of the bank's training manual, her finger tracing the bolded phrases. "Unusual activity, verify all details." The examples in the margins showed faces that looked like Elijah's, not hers. She circled extra verification in red ink, the pen leaving a faint groove in the paper. Her supervisor's notes were scribbled in the margins. "Be cautious. If in doubt, escalate." Madison glanced up at the line, her gaze landing on Elijah, then darting away. A white customer approached, depositing a wad of cash. Madison smiled, barely glancing at his ID before handing him a receipt. The manual's spine creaked as she closed it, the words echoing in her mind. She reached for her coffee, her hand trembling slightly, and took a sip, trying to steady herself. The security guard wandered past, glancing at her open manual, then at Elijah, his brow furrowing. Madison's coworker leaned over, whispering, "You know what they expect." Madison nodded, biting her lip, the pressure of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. She opened the manual again, flipping to the section on high-risk transactions. The photos were all the same: darker skin, unfamiliar names, warnings in bold. Madison's pen hovered over the checklist, her eyes scanning the steps. Ask for additional documentation. Notify management if uncertain. She glanced at Elijah, who waited quietly, his patience unwavering. The manual felt heavier in her hands, the words more like orders than guidance. She closed it with a soft thud, sliding it under the counter, but the message lingered. Every policy, every highlighted line, seemed to whisper a warning. Trust some, doubt others. Madison straightened her name tag, forcing a smile as she called Elijah forward, the manual's bias now a silent partner in every move she made, every question she asked, every barrier she built without even realizing it. Madison leaned closer to her co-worker, lowering her voice as she counted out 20s and 50s. "Do you think he's legit?" she murmured, her eyes flicking quickly toward Elijah as he waited by the velvet rope. Her co-worker shrugged, barely looking up from her own stack of bills, a faint frown creasing her brow. "It's not our job to ask questions," she replied, but her tone was uncertain, her hands moving a little faster. Madison's fingers hesitated. Over the cash drawer, the metal edges cool against her skin. She glanced at Elijah again, watching the way he stood, unmoving, composed, refusing to fidget or look away. The manager walked by, pausing just long enough to catch the tension between the two tellers. He offered a quick dismissive nod, signaling them to keep the line moving. Madison's co-worker tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Just do what the book says," she whispered, eyes darting to the manual tucked beneath the counter. Madison nodded, but her jaw clenched, as she closed the drawer with a muted thud. The sound made Elijah look up, his gaze steady and unreadable. For a moment, Madison felt exposed, the weight of her own uncertainty settling in her chest. The line shuffled forward, a customer clearing his throat impatiently. Madison forced a smile, calling, "Next, please." But her voice was thin, the confidence gone. Her co-worker handed her a stack of forms, their hands brushing briefly, a silent exchange of doubt neither would name out loud. The cash drawer locked with a click, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Madison's eyes met Elijah's one more time, and in that brief connection she felt the cost of every small decision, every whisper, every time she chose to follow rather than question. Mr. Green pushed his broom along the lobby tiles, each stroke slow and deliberate, gathering dust that never seemed to disappear. He paused near Madison's counter, his gaze drifting to Elijah, who stood waiting with his documents in hand. Under his breath, Mr. Green muttered, "Same story, just a new face." His words were barely audible, lost beneath the hum of the bank's air conditioning. Madison glanced at him, her eyes flickering with discomfort before darting away. The security guard passed by, nodding at Mr. Green, who responded with a tired half-smile. As he swept, Mr. Green caught sight of the red light on the security camera, blinking in the corner, recording everything yet never changing anything. He shook his head, gripping the broom tighter. A customer dropped a receipt, and Mr. Green bent to pick it up, his knees creaking. He straightened, watching as Madison double-checked Elijah's paperwork, her lips pressed thin. The manager strode, past, barely acknowledging the janitor's presence, focused only on the growing tension at the counter. Mr. Green's hands tightened around the broom handle, knuckles pale. He swept the dust into a pan, the sound sharp in the quiet lobby. A young teller offered him a nod, her expression apologetic, but neither spoke. Mr. Green moved on, his broom leaving faint streaks on the floor, a silent protest against a system that never seemed to notice. He paused once more, glancing back at Elijah, seeing in him the same quiet endurance he'd witnessed for decades. The bank's routine continued, but beneath the surface, Mr. Green's muted fury simmered, each broom stroke a reminder that some things were swept aside, but never truly gone. Rosa approached the counter, her shoulders squared, a check clutched tightly in her hand. Madison barely glanced up, her tone flat as she asked, "Deposit or cash?" Rosa replied, "Deposit, please," her voice steady but quiet. Madison took the check, holding it up to the light, her brow furrowing as she examined the signature. She tapped a few keys, then paused. "Can I see your ID?" Rosa handed it over, her fingers brushing the counter. Madison scrutinized the ID, then the check again. Her lips pursed. The line behind Rosa grew, a few customers shifting impatiently, but Madison didn't rush. She turned to the manager, raising her voice just enough for others to hear. "Can you approve this?" The manager approached, barely glancing at Rosa, his focus on the paperwork. He stamped the check with a heavy hand, muttering, "Looks fine," before walking away. Madison returned the ID, her eyes never meeting Rosa's. "It'll take a few days to clear," she said, her words clipped. Rosa nodded, her jaw set, and stepped aside. Elijah watched the exchange, his expression tightening as he saw the familiar pattern play out. The security guard leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gaze flicking from Madison to Rosa, then away. A young teller at the next window offered Rosa a small, sympathetic smile, but Rosa didn't see it. She gathered her things, her movements careful, and walked toward the exit, her dignity intact but her frustration clear. Madison straightened the stack of checks on her counter, her face blank. The lobby's quiet grew heavier, the unspoken message hanging in the air. Some customers would always be questioned more, their presence a problem to be solved rather than a person to be served. In the back office, the security guard sat hunched over his monitor, the glow of the screens painting his face in pale blue. He rewound the morning's footage, watching Madison's hands linger on IDs, her eyes narrowing at certain customers. Clip after clip, a pattern emerged. Black and brown clients faced extra questions, longer waits, more scrutiny. The guard's finger hovered over the pause button as Elijah's image appeared on screen, standing tall, patient, enduring the same slow interrogation. The guard leaned closer, jaw clenched, replaying the moment Madison flagged Rosa's check, the manager's dismissive stamp, the way both women left the counter with dignity, but without warmth. He clicked through older files, the scenes repeating with different faces, the same routine. His hands trembled as he copied the footage onto a flash drive, the device blinking red in the dark. The hum of the air conditioning filled the silence, broken only by the guard's heavy sigh. He glanced at the door, making sure no one was watching, then slipped the drive into his pocket. A young teller entered, asking if he wanted coffee. He shook his head, offering a tight smile. "Just catching up in the morning," he said, voice low. She nodded, leaving him alone with the evidence. He looked back at the screen, Elijah's calm composure, frozen in the frame, a silent testimony to the morning's injustice. The guard closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of what he'd seen pressing down on him. He knew the footage was more than just video. It was proof, a record, of what everyone felt but few dared to say out loud. The screen flickered, the pattern undeniable, and the guard knew he couldn't erase what he now carried. In a cramped office lined with overflowing folders, Denise from HR scrolled through her inbox, her eyes scanning subject lines that all seemed to blur together. Racial profiling complaint, unfair treatment at counter, customer concern ignored. She clicked one open, reading a customer's detailed account of being questioned repeatedly about their ID, their tone polite. "But weary?" Denise sighed, glancing at the clock on her screen, then at the stack of reports waiting to be filed. Her mouse hovered over the archive button. With a click, the email disappeared into a folder rarely checked. She opened another, this one from a teller, quietly reporting a pattern of extra checks for certain clients. Denise bit her lip, hesitating, then dragged it to the same folder. The office was quiet except for the hum of her computer and the muted ring of a distant phone. A manager poked his head in, asking, "Anything urgent?" Denise shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just the usual," she replied, her voice flat. He nodded, already turning away. Denise returned to her screen, opening yet another email, the words blurring as she read, "Why does this keep happening?" She closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to her temples, then deleted the message. The trash icon glowed briefly before fading. She looked at the wall where a poster read, "Every voice matters," its edges curling from age. Denise closed her laptop, the weight of what she'd buried pressing on her chest. The complaints were gone from her inbox, but not from the bank's walls, not from the memories of those who sent them. Outside, laughter drifted in from the break room, but Denise remained seated, alone with the knowledge that silence, too, could be a decision. Olivia stood behind the counter, her fingers hovering above the keyboard, hesitating as the line moved forward. She whispered Elijah's name under her breath, determined to get it right, unwilling to let him become just another file in the system. Her eyes darted to Madison, who was questioning a customer with a clipped tone, her posture rigid, her scrutiny relentless. Olivia felt her heart pounding, the tension in the lobby pressing down on her. She pulled out her notepad, scribbling a quick note. Discrepancy in procedure. Her hand shook as she signed it without her name, the act both brave and terrifying. A coworker leaned close, murmuring, "You think this will do any good?" Olivia nodded, swallowing her fear. She saw the security guard walk by, his nod subtle but supportive, a silent acknowledgement that she wasn't alone. The viral tweet about the bank's bias was already spreading, and Olivia felt the weight of the moment. This was her chance to do something, even if it was small. She glanced at the clock, then at Elijah, who waited with patient dignity, his composure a quiet challenge to the room's unease. The staff around her seemed caught between routine and something new, their faces tense, their actions more careful than usual. Olivia took a steadying breath, her resolve settling in her chest. The camera above blinked, recording every detail as she slipped the note into the suggestion box. It was a small act, but it was hers, a refusal to be complicit, a spark in the dark. The atmosphere in the bank shifted, the anticipation thick, as Olivia's quiet rebellion became the first step toward change, captured in the silent gaze of the lens and the hopeful beat of her heart. A phone buzzed on the break room table, its screen lighting up with a notification. Bank racism caught on tape. An anonymous Twitter account had posted a grainy clip from the security feed, Madison's tense face, Elijah's calm endurance, the drawn-out questioning that seemed to last forever. Within minutes, the tweet was shared hundreds of times, with comments piling up. "This is why we don't trust banks. Same thing happened to my dad. Look at his patience." Olivia watched the video on her own phone, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the replies. She recognized the angle. It had to be the security guard's desk. Across the lobby, a customer whispered to her friend, "Did you see the video? That's this place." The manager's office door closed a little tighter. Madison, oblivious, continued her routine, but the staff around her grew restless, their glances sharper, their conversations quieter. The security guard checked his phone, his jaw set, knowing the story was out now, beyond anyone's control. Elijah's image steady, dignified became the face of the thread, his quiet resistance speaking louder than any protest. Olivia screenshot the trending hashtag, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. The bank's atmosphere changed, the usual hum replaced by a nervous energy, every employee suddenly aware that eyes from outside were watching. A teller in the back room muttered, "We can't hide this anymore." The viral spark had caught and the tinder was dry. As notifications kept buzzing, Olivia realized that the truth had finally found its voice, not in shouts, but in the steady, undeniable witness of a single, shared moment. Mr. Riley sat behind his desk, the door closed, the blinds drawn against, the lobby's growing buzz. His computer chimed with a new alert, the viral tweet now trending, the bank's name tagged in hundreds of posts. He clicked the window closed, rubbing his temples, refusing to watch the video. On his desk, Olivia's anonymous note sat atop a stack of paperwork. He picked it up, read, "Discrepancy in procedure," and set it aside without a second thought. The phone rang. He let it go to voicemail. Outside, he heard the staff's voices drop to hushed tones, their laughter replaced by anxious whispers. Madison passed by his office, her expression tight, but he avoided her gaze, pretending to be absorbed in a spreadsheet. A junior teller knocked, asking if he'd seen the news online. "Don't stir things up," he muttered, waving her away. The air in his office felt heavy, the silence pressing in as if the walls themselves were waiting for him to act. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his hand unsteady, the mug rattling against the saucer. In the hallway, the security guard's footsteps echoed, purposeful and slow. Mr. Riley glanced at the suggestion box, now overflowing with slips of paper, but made no move to open it. He stared at the bank's mission statement framed on the wall. Integrity, trust, community. The words hollow in the face of what he refused to see. As the lobby's tension mounted, Mr. Riley remained seated, choosing comfort over confrontation, silence over truth. The world outside his office was changing, but he clung to routine, blind to the storm building just beyond his door. Elijah stood near the counter, his hands resting lightly on his briefcase, eyes scanning the lobby. He caught the sideways glances from staff, the way conversations paused when he walked by. The viral video played on a customer's phone in line, the volume low, but the tension unmistakable. Olivia offered him a small, encouraging nod as she passed, her resolve clear in her posture. Madison avoided his gaze, focusing on her paperwork, her fingers fumbling with a stack of forms. The security guard lingered near the entrance, his stance less rigid, as if waiting for a cue. Elijah adjusted his cufflinks, a habit learned from his father, a reminder to stay composed no matter the pressure. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Denise in HR. "It's time." He read it, exhaled slowly, and slipped the phone away. The manager's office door remained closed, the blinds still drawn. Elijah's presence filled the space, his calm a quiet challenge to the uncertainty swirling around him. A customer whispered, "That's the man from the video," and the words rippled through the room. The line shuffled forward, people more, alert, watching for what would happen next. Elijah met Olivia's eyes, offering a brief, reassuring smile. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, every gesture and glance loaded with meaning. He straightened his tie, checked his watch, and waited. Not passive, but ready. The storm outside had faded, but inside the air was charged with possibility. Elijah's poise was not just patience, it was preparation, the stillness before a reckoning. In that moment, he was both witness and catalyst, his dignity the anchor in a room on the edge of change. Madison's hand hovered over the hold button on her screen, her brow furrowed as she weighed her next move. The lobby's noise faded to a hush, every eye drawn to the counter. She pressed the button, her voice barely steady as she announced, "Your account will be temporarily frozen for further review." Elijah didn't flinch. He leaned in, his tone even, his words deliberate. "Would you like to speak to the branch owner before you do that?" The question landed heavy, slicing through the tension. Madison's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the desk. Mr. Riley emerged from his office, his face pale as he registered the shift in the room. The security guard straightened, alert but uncertain. Olivia's breath caught, her eyes wide as she realized what was happening. Madison stammered, I wasn't aware," but Elijah's gaze held hers, calm and unyielding. "You are now," he replied, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the lobby. Mr. Riley tried to regain control, clearing his throat, but the authority had already left him. The customers in line watched, silent, some with quiet satisfaction, others with disbelief. The atmosphere was charged, the balance of power unmistakably altered. Madison retrieved her pen with shaky hands, her confidence unraveling as she realized the consequences of her actions. Elijah gathered his documents, his movements measured, his dignity untouched. The security camera's red light blinked in the corner, recording every detail, every shift in posture and tone. The moment stretched, the weight of unspoken truths, pressing on everyone present. Elijah's calm assertion had changed the room, exposing the fragility of the old order. The reckoning wasn't loud, but it was absolute, a door opening to a new reality. The future arriving on the heels of a single, quiet question. Elijah reached into his briefcase and placed a business card on the smooth marble, sliding it across, to Madison with a steady hand. She stared at it, confusion flickering across her face until she read the embossed letters. Elijah Carter, branch owner. The words seemed to echo through the lobby, louder than any raised voice. Mr. Riley's mouth opened slightly, his apology caught in his throat as he realized the gravity of the moment. Madison's fingers curled around the card, her knuckles, paling, her practiced composure slipping away. The security guard watched, his arms crossed, a subtle nod acknowledging the shift in power. Olivia, standing at the next window, paused mid-transaction, her eyes wide with realization. The customers in line fell silent, the usual hum of conversation replaced by a heavy stillness. Elijah's calm remained unbroken, his gaze unwavering, as he met Madison's eyes. Mr. Riley finally managed a strained, "Mr. Carter," but the word sounded hollow, stripped of authority. Madison's breath hitched, her nails pressing into the card as if it might anchor her. The security camera above whirred, capturing the tableau. The owner revealing himself, the staff caught off guard, the system exposed. Elijah didn't gloat. He simply waited, letting the truth settle. The lobby felt suspended in time, every person present aware that the rules had changed. Madison's hand trembled as she set the card down, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know." Elijah offered a small, measured nod, his dignity undiminished. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of consequence, the weight of realization pressing on everyone there. In that pause, the balance of power shifted for good. The old order quietly undone by a single, undeniable fact. Madison's hand shook as she set Elijah's card down, her eyes darting from his calm face to the silent crowd behind him. The veteran teller badge pinned to her blouse felt suddenly heavy, almost mocking. She tried to gather her composure, but her voice cracked as she stammered, I apologize, Mr. Carter, I didn't realize." Her words trailed off, swallowed by the thick quiet. Elijah's steady gaze didn't waver. He didn't need to say anything. The shift in the room said it all. The security guard uncrossed his arms, his posture softening, while Olivia at the next window bit her lip, sympathy and relief flickering across her face. The manager hovered nearby, uncertain, his authority diminished. Madison's fingers fumbled, with the stamp she'd used so confidently moments before, now unable to find its place. She reached for her pen, but it rolled off the counter and clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the stillness. A customer in line exhaled, the tension breaking just enough for everyone to breathe again. Madison bent to retrieve the pen, her cheeks flushed as she straightened. The confidence she'd worn like armor had vanished, replaced by a raw vulnerability. She tried to muster a smile, but it faltered, her lips barely moving. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, but the words felt small, almost lost. Elijah simply nodded, his dignity intact, his presence a quiet rebuke. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, the reality settling in. The old ways no longer held. Madison's authority, once absolute behind the counter, had dissolved in the face of truth. She stood exposed, her arrogance reduced to ashes, her role in the story forever changed by a moment she could never take back. The aftermath lingered in the air, thick and unspoken. Tellers avoided Elijah's gaze, their eyes fixed on keyboards, on stacks of forms, on anything but the truth now sitting at the center of the room. Olivia's hands shook as she filed away receipts, her jaw clenched with a mix of shame and relief. Mr. Green, the janitor, paused mid-sweep, his expression a blend of satisfaction and sorrow as he watched Madison's collapse from across the lobby. The manager tugged at his collar, sweat beading at his hairline, his confidence evaporated. No one spoke. The only sounds were the muted rustle of paper and the distant whir of the security camera. A young teller at the far end of the counter glanced at Madison, then quickly looked away, guilt flickering in her eyes. The customers in line sensed the shift, some exchanging glances, others quietly rooting for Elijah. Madison kept her head down, her shoulders hunched, her authority gone. The staff's collective discomfort filled the space, every gesture loaded with regret. Elijah stood quietly, his presence a silent reminder of what had just unfolded. He didn't need to say a word. The message was clear in every bowed head, every averted glance. The old order had cracked, leaving behind a room full of people suddenly aware of their own complicity. The atmosphere was no longer tense but heavy, weighted by the recognition that things could never return to how they were. In that moment, the staff's guilt was as visible as any confession, their downcast eyes telling the story of a reckoning that had finally arrived. In the dim light of the back office, the security guard sat before a wall of monitors, his face illuminated by the flickering images. He replayed the footage from the lobby, watching Madison's confidence unravel and Elijah's quiet composure hold steady. Clip after clip, the truth became impossible to deny. The pattern of extra questions, the subtle shifts in tone, the way customers of color lingered longer at the counter. The guard's hand hovered over the mouse, his breath shallow as he paused on the moment Elijah slid his business card across the marble. He copied the file to a flash drive, the device blinking with each transfer. A notification popped up on his phone, bank bias exposed, and he realized the world outside was already seeing what he saw. He hesitated, then attached the video to an anonymous email and hit send. In the lobby, the staff moved with new caution, their actions more deliberate. Madison's face, caught in a freeze frame of realization, stared back at the guard from the screen. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. A junior teller entered, asking if he'd seen the news online. "Yeah," he replied, voice low. "It's all on tape." The teller nodded, her expression uneasy as she glanced at the monitors. The guard watched the footage loop, the evidence now out of his hands, the story no longer confined to the bank's walls. The black and white images told everything words could not, a system laid bare, a reckoning captured frame by frame. The hot truth, once hidden in routine, was now undeniable, broadcast to anyone willing to see. Mr. Riley stepped into the lobby, his footsteps hesitant as he surveyed the scene. The usual confidence in his stride was gone, replaced by a cautious uncertainty. He cleared his throat, trying to reclaim control. "Madison, please step aside," he instructed, his voice lacking its former weight. Madison obeyed, her eyes fixed on the floor as she moved away from the counter. Elijah stood tall, his presence commanding the room without a word. The staff watched, their attention shifting from the manager to Elijah, recognizing where the real authority now rested. Mr. Riley's gold nameplate sat crooked on the desk. Elijah reached out and straightened it with a quiet deliberateness. That didn't go unnoticed. A ripple of whispers passed through the tellers, one murmuring, "He owns the place now," the words carrying more truth than anyone had dared to say aloud before. Mr. Riley's hand shook as he picked up his coffee, the cup rattling against the saucer. He tried to muster a reassuring smile, but it faltered, his authority slipping further with every passing second. The security guard lingered by the doorway, arms crossed, watching the subtle transfer of power. Olivia exchanged a glance with a coworker, relief and respect mingling in her eyes. The customers in line stood a little straighter, sensing the change. Mr. Riley attempted to speak again, but the words caught in his throat, the moment already lost. Elijah remained composed, his dignity unshaken, the new center of gravity in a room that had finally shifted. The balance of power had changed hands, not with a shout, but with a series of small, undeniable actions that left no doubt about who was truly in charge. Elijah stepped forward, his voice calm but resonant as he addressed the staff and customers gathered in the lobby. "Respect isn't about titles or badges," he began, his gaze sweeping the room. "It's about how we treat people when no one's watching." A customer near the back quietly started recording, their phone held low. Madison stood off to the side, her posture rigid, the training manual on her desk open to a page marked in red. Elijah continued, "Every person who walks through these doors deserves to feel safe, to feel seen, not just some. All. Olivia nodded, her eyes shining with relief and pride. The security guard leaned against the wall, arms uncrossed now, his stance relaxed. Mr. Riley looked down, his hands folded awkwardly, realizing the moment was no longer his to control. "I learned from my father," Elijah said, his voice steady, "that dignity isn't given by a uniform or a title. It's something you carry, even when it's tested." He paused, letting the words settle. "We have a chance to do better. To be better. Starting today." The staff exchanged glances, the old order slipping away as a new understanding took root. Madison closed her manual, her hands trembling, the red mark a silent reminder of what needed to change. Elijah's cufflinks caught the light as he gestured toward the exit, signaling that the speech was over but the work was just beginning. The lobby was quiet, but the silence was different now, full of possibility, not fear. As Elijah stepped back, the respect he commanded was no longer about his title, but about the truth he'd spoken and the example he'd set for everyone in the room. In the cramped break room, the air buzzed with a new kind of tension. Olivia scrolled through her phone, the viral video of Elijah's speech replaying in her palm. She texted the link to a coworker who glanced up from her sandwich, eyes wide with disbelief. Madison sat alone at the corner table, staring at her, her untouched coffee cooling beside her. The janitor, Mr. Green, taped a fresh newspaper headline to the fridge. "Branch owner exposes bias." A hush fell as staff read the headline, the truth impossible to ignore. Mr. Riley's office door remained closed, his silhouette barely visible through the frosted glass. The coffee machine sputtered, filling the silence with its low hum. "A," Teller whispered. "Did you hear what he said about respect?" Another replied, "It's about time someone did." Olivia nodded, her voice quiet but certain. "Things have to change now." Madison's cheeks flushed, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. She looked up, meeting Olivia's gaze for the first time since the lobby confrontation. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken apologies and new resolve. The staff shifted in their seats, the old routines feeling suddenly out of place. Mr. Green caught Olivia's eye and gave a small, approving nod, his pride clear. The break room, once a place of idle chatter and routine complaints, now felt charged with purpose. The staff knew the world outside was watching, but more importantly, they were watching each other, ready to hold themselves accountable. The system was waking up, not with fanfare, but with whispers, glances, and the quiet determination to do better than before. Madison approached Elijah in the lobby, her steps hesitant, her hands twisting the edge of her sleeve. She opened her mouth, searching for words, but Elijah raised a gentle hand before she could speak. "Not to me," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm. He nodded toward Rosa, who stood waiting in line, her posture dignified despite the morning's scrutiny. Madison's lips parted, but the apology caught in her throat, unspoken. Rosa glanced over, her eyes meeting Madison's for a brief, loaded moment, before she turned away, choosing her own pride over a hollow gesture. The security camera's red light blinked in the corner, recording every awkward pause, every small act of restraint. Olivia watched from her station, her expression a mix of empathy and disappointment. Mr. Riley lingered near his office, uncertain whether to intervene or disappear. The lobby's energy shifted, the staff sensing the weight of what remained unsaid. Madison lowered her gaze, her cheeks flushed, the apology she'd rehearsed all day suddenly meaningless. Elijah gathered his belongings, his dignity untouched, his silence louder than any confrontation. The customers in line resumed their quiet conversations, but the atmosphere was different now, more aware, more honest. Madison returned to her desk, her shoulders slumped, her authority diminished. Rosa stepped forward, her head high, her presence a quiet rebuke. The moment passed, but its lesson lingered. Some wounds could not be mended with words, and some apologies, when left unspoken, said more than any speech ever could. The next morning, Denise from HR posted a new set of guidelines on the staff bulletin board, Mandatory bias training. Anonymous feedback encouraged. Fair hiring practices. The staff tablets pinged with notifications. Each update a quiet signal that the bank's rules were changing. Madison arrived to find her access card no longer opened at the main teller station. She was reassigned to a back office, her role now limited and out of sight. Olivia read the new policies, relief and hope mingling in her expression as she realized her quiet rebellion had mattered. Elijah watched from his office, his father's photograph on the desk beside him, a silent reminder of the journey that brought him here. Outside, Mr. Green repainted the lobby sign, his brush steady as he added "Inclusive Banking" in fresh gold letters beneath the bank's name. The security guard reviewed the new procedures, nodding to himself, his sense of duty renewed. Staff gathered in small groups, reading and discussing the changes, their voices low but determined. The atmosphere in the bank shifted, the old routines giving way to a new sense of accountability. Customers noticed the difference too, greetings warmer, questions fewer, the air lighter. Denise walked through the lobby, checking in with each employee, her presence a reminder that change was now being watched and measured. For the first time, the promise of fairness felt real, not just a slogan on a poster. The revolution was quiet, unfolding in policy updates, in the way people spoke to each other, in the small acts of respect that replaced suspicion. The bank was becoming something new, not through grand gestures, but through the steady, deliberate work of making things right. Elijah stepped out of his office, the new policies still fresh in everyone's minds. He paused at the edge of the lobby, his presence drawing the attention of every staff member. The rain outside had returned, tapping softly against the windows. "Staff meeting now," Elijah announced, his voice calm but carrying authority that left no room for doubt. Mr. Riley jumped at the summons, nearly spilling his coffee as he scrambled to follow. Olivia set down her tablet, determination in her eyes as she joined the others. Madison lingered by the back office door, clutching her now useless name tag, uncertain whether to join or disappear. The security guard locked the front doors, signaling to customers that the bank would reopen soon. Mr. Green leaned his mop against the wall, wiping his hands on his apron before taking a seat at the edge of the group. Denise from HR stood near the front, clipboard tucked under her arm, ready to listen as much as to lead. Elijah waited until everyone was gathered, his gaze sweeping the room. The staff shifted in their seats, the old hierarchy gone, replaced by a sense of shared responsibility. The rain grew heavier, the sound a steady backdrop to the moment. Elijah's shadow stretched across the marble floor, a silent reminder of the change he now embodied. "We're going to talk about what comes next," he said, his words simple but full of promise. The staff leaned in, some anxious, some hopeful, all aware that the reckoning was not over but just beginning. Outside, thunder rumbled, but inside, the atmosphere was charged with the possibility of a new chapter, one written by every voice in the room. Madison sat alone at the break-room table, her phone screen casting a pale blue light across her face. She scrolled through the endless stream of headlines and comments, each one a reminder of the morning she wished she could erase. Her coffee sat untouched, growing cold beside her. Laughter drifted in from the hallway, but no one stepped inside. She replayed the moment Elijah slid his business card across the counter, the realization crashing over her again and again. Her hands trembled as she read a comment. "This is why people lose trust." Another, "She should have known better." Madison closed her eyes, the regret settling heavy in her chest. She thought about apologizing, about what she would even say, but the words felt empty now. She remembered the look on Rosa's face, the quiet disappointment in Olivia's eyes, the way Mr. Riley avoided her in the hall. The staff meeting had ended, but the weight of her actions lingered. She scrolled further, pausing on a photo of the new lobby sign, "Inclusive Banking." The words stung, a reminder of what she'd failed to offer. The blue glow of her phone flickered as another notification appeared, the story still spreading. Madison set the phone down, her reflection staring back at her in the dark screen. She wondered if things could ever feel normal again, if she'd ever earn back the trust she'd lost in a single irreversible moment. The break room felt smaller, the shadows longer, as Madison sat with her regret, the world outside moving on while she remained caught in the blue glow of her own mistakes. Madison walked home beneath a gray sky, her steps slow, the rain from earlier now just a memory on the pavement. She passed the corner store where she used to exchange greetings, but today the cashier looked away, pretending to restock shelves. On Maple Avenue, a neighbor she'd known for years crossed to the opposite sidewalk, her eyes fixed on the ground. Curtains twitched as Madison approached her apartment, faces appearing for a moment before disappearing behind fabric. The silence was heavier than words. It followed her up the stairs, into the hallway, and all the way to her door. She fumbled with her keys, glancing back to see a group of children pausing their game, their parents calling them inside with a sense of urgency. That hadn't been there before. The weight of the morning's events pressed down, every step a reminder that her world had shrunk. Inside, she set her bag down and looked out the window, watching as the street emptied, the usual sounds of laughter and conversation replaced by a quiet she'd never noticed before. Her phone buzzed with another news alert, but she ignored it, unable to face more reminders of her mistake. Madison realized that forgiveness, if it ever came, would not be quick or easy. The neighborhood's verdict was clear in every averted glance, every closed curtain, every path crossed to avoid her. She sat by the window, the city's life moving on without her, and understood that sometimes the harshest judgment comes not from headlines or online comments, but from the quiet distance of those who once called you neighbor. Elijah stood at the front of the training room, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting long lines across the carpet. The staff gathered, in rows, some arms folded, others with notepads open, all eyes on him. He spoke with a quiet authority, his words measured, never rushed. "Respect isn't a policy, it's a practice," he began, his gaze meeting each person in turn. Olivia nodded, jotting down notes, her posture open and eager. Madison sat near the back, her shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, the sting of recent days still fresh. Elijah shared his story, not with anger, but with honesty, describing what it felt like to be doubted, to have to prove himself over and over. "Dignity," he said, "isn't something you grant. It's something you recognize." The room was silent, every word landing with weight. Mr. Green, sitting near the door, gave a small approving nod, his respect clear. Denise from HR listened intently, ready to turn words into action. Elijah didn't lecture, he was invited. "What would you change?" he asked, opening the floor. Olivia spoke first, her voice strong. "We need to listen more to each other and to our customers." A junior teller suggested shadowing different roles, learning empathy from experience. Even Madison, after a long pause, raised her hand. "We can do better," she said quietly, her voice trembling but sincere. Elijah offered a gentle smile, acknowledging her courage. The session ended not with applause, but with a sense of possibility. As the staff filed out, the air felt lighter, the barriers between them just a little thinner. Elijah remained behind, looking out the window, hopeful that this new chapter would be written by every voice in the room, not just his own. The next week, the bank's bulletin board filled with new notices, anonymous feedback forms, reminders for diversity workshops, and a schedule for staff to rotate roles. Tablets pinged with updates, each message a quiet nudge toward change. Olivia read the guidelines aloud to a group of tellers, her voice steady. "Every customer deserves equal treatment, no exceptions." A few staff exchanged uncertain glances, but no one objected. Denise from HR walked the floor, checking in, with each employee, her presence reassuring, her questions gentle. Madison, now working in a quieter back office, watched the changes unfold from a distance, her feelings a mix of regret and relief. Mr. Green noticed the difference, too. People greeted him by name, thanked him for his work, and included him in morning meetings. The security guard reviewed the new procedures, nodding in approval as he watched the lobby's mood shift. Customers sensed it as well. Greetings were warmer, wait times shorter, and the tension that once haunted the air was gone. Elijah observed from his office, a quiet pride in his eyes as he saw the staff adapt, each small act of inclusion building on the last. The changes didn't come with fanfare, but with steady, deliberate effort policies put into practice, respect shown in action, not just words. The bank felt different now, more open, more just, the quiet revolution unfolding in everyday moments. As Denise pinned the final notice to the board, she smiled, knowing that the true measure of change was not in what was posted, but in what was lived. Madison's days grew quieter as she settled into her new position in the back office, her interactions limited to paperwork and emails. The hum of the lobby was replaced by the soft clatter of keyboards and the distant sound of laughter she was no longer part of. Olivia, meanwhile, was promoted to lead teller, her integrity and empathy recognized by both staff and customers. She greeted each person with genuine warmth, her confidence growing with every positive interaction. Mr. Green found himself invited to team meetings, his insights valued, his years of overlooked service finally acknowledged. Denise made sure the new policies were more than just words on a bulletin board, checking in regularly and encouraging honest conversations. Elijah watched these shifts unfold, his satisfaction quiet but deep. He knew real change was measured in these subtle, lasting adjustments. Madison sometimes caught glimpses of her former role through the office window, a bittersweet reminder of what she'd lost and what she'd learned. She worked diligently, hoping that her actions might someday speak louder than her past mistakes. Olivia's leadership set a new tone for the team, fostering respect and openness where suspicion once lingered. The staff adapted, learning to value perspectives they'd once ignored. The bank's atmosphere was transformed, not by grand gestures, but by the steady rebalancing of roles and the quiet recognition of those who had always deserved respect. In these new routines, justice found its form, not in punishment, but in the dignity of being seen and valued for who you are and what you bring. Mr. Green arrived early, as he always did, pushing his mop bucket down the quiet hallway. He found a folded note taped to the wooden handle, the handwriting careful and unfamiliar. "Thank you for seeing what others missed," it read, signed. Simply, "Elijah." Mr. Green paused, the words sinking in, his eyes stinging with unexpected emotion. For years, he'd swept the same floors, witnessed the same slights, his presence rarely acknowledged beyond a passing nod. Today, though, he was seen. He tucked the note into his shirt pocket, standing a little taller as he made his rounds. Olivia greeted him by name as she passed, her smile genuine. Denise stopped to ask how his morning was going, listening to his answer instead of hurrying away. Even Madison, on her way to the back office, offered a quiet thank you, her voice soft but sincere. The staff noticed the change, the way Mr. Green's pride showed in his careful work, the way he lingered a moment longer in the lobby, no longer invisible. Elijah watched from his office, satisfied that the culture was shifting, not just in policy, but in the small human ways that mattered most. The note became a symbol, passed quietly among the staff, a reminder that respect isn't reserved for those in suits or behind counters. It belongs to everyone who keeps the place running, often without recognition. Mr. Green tucked the note away, but its message stayed with him, a quiet affirmation that dignity could be restored with something as simple as being seen, heard, and thanked. The new plaque gleamed on the lobby wall, sunlight catching the gold letters, "Every customer counts." Customers paused to read it as they entered, some smiling, others thoughtful, a few snapping photos to share with friends. The staff stood a little straighter, the words a daily reminder of how far the bank had come. Olivia explained its meaning to a curious child, her voice bright with pride. Mr. Green polished the floor beneath it, taking extra care, his reflection shimmering in the marble. Denise pointed it out to new hires on their first day, making sure they understood the promise behind the phrase. Madison, passing through on her way to the back office, stopped for a moment, her eyes lingering on the inscription, a mix of regret and hope flickering across her face. Elijah watched from his office, the plaque visible through the glass, a symbol of change that was both public and personal. Customers who had once felt unwelcome now lingered a little longer, their conversations warmer, their trust slowly returning. The plaque was more than decoration. It was a commitment, etched in metal and lived out in every interaction. The atmosphere in the bank felt lighter, the old tension replaced by a sense of shared purpose. Each day, as the sun moved across the lobby, the words caught the light, a quiet affirmation that everyone who walked through those doors mattered, and that respect was no longer conditional, but guaranteed. Elijah stood near the lobby's entrance, watching as customers were greeted with genuine warmth by the staff. The air felt lighter, conversations flowed more easily, and the guarded glances that once haunted the room had faded. Olivia chatted with an elderly man about his grandchildren, while Mr. Green shared a laugh with a young mother as he polished the floor. Denise checked in with new hires, her encouragement sincere, her questions thoughtful. Even Madison, quieter now, offered a respectful nod to each person she passed. The security guard held the door for a customer with a stroller, his smile easy and unforced. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. Fewer complaints, more compliments, a sense of welcome that reached every corner of the bank. Elijah reflected on the journey, the struggles and small victories that had led to this moment. Change doesn't roar, he thought, echoing his father's wisdom. It whispers, one act of dignity at a time. The staff gathered for a brief meeting, sharing ideas and listening to one another, the old hierarchy replaced by a spirit of collaboration. As the day ended, sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the plaque that read, "Every customer counts." The transformation was not marked by applause or celebration, but by the steady, hopeful rhythm of people choosing respect again and again. Elijah smiled, knowing the story was still being written, each day a new chance to build trust, offer kindness, and prove that real change lives in the quiet moments when no one is watching.